Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Greetings, this is William Pullin. Welcome to From Beyond, Not of This Earth. This is the premiere episode of this program. This program is going to take a look at different classic cases, lesser known cases, scenarios, and profiles of individuals, all specific to the UFO problem. Before I start tonight's program, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to Adam Davies and Mike Richburg for the wonderful opportunity to host this program. I'm looking forward to be able to do this on a more consistent basis. So let's move forward. Tonight's program is entitled UFOs, a Numbers Game. In the efforts to investigate the UFO phenomenon, whether from a civilian standpoint or military standpoint, whether from the standpoint of investigators that work independently, or from civilian UFO research organizations such as NICAP, APRO, and MUFON, we've been stunted by our ability to gather sighting reports. So we're left with numbers, testimony. The numbers suggest strongly the alien visitation has taken place. Unfortunately, we're working with an incomplete set of data. There's 2 points I want to make, and I'll discuss them at length later in the program, that are fairly important. One, after objective scrutiny, after unbiased investigation by civilian groups, military groups, legitimate military groups, I should say, and independent researchers, the same percentage has shown up. 90 to 95% of UFO sightings are unexplained. Excuse me, should I say 90 to 95% of UFO sightings are explainable, leaving only 5 to 10% unexplained. That's a small percentage. When you think about that from a purely numerical standpoint, it's a very small percentage. Numbers-wise, that's a lot of sightings. Percentage-wise, very small. Of that 5 to 10% of unknowns, how many are potentially extraterrestrial? We don't know. We really don't know. Certainly a percentage of those could be military aircraft that civilians are not privy to. That's a strong possibility. Individuals do misidentify things. So some of those unidentified, some of those unexplained, may be attributable to cases that have a shortage of information. Therefore, an unexplained label may be the only one that's attributable to that case. In other words, with less evidence, less testimony, less data, we're less able to define and arrive at a definitive answer. That's a commonplace occurrence in UFO investigations. We'll get back to that a little later in this program. The second point that needs to be made is that the percentage of cases that go unreported is unknown. That needs to be said again. The percentage of cases that go unreported is unknown. We don't know how many go unreported. Most investigators feel that the majority of UFO sightings go unreported. The majority. So that leaves us with an incomplete set of data. The data we have reflects an incomplete set, less than half of UFO sightings. That's a very troubling scenario. So the conclusions, the patterns, the deductions we've arrived at after investigations of the data we have may be completely wrong, may be skewed, because, again, the data is incomplete. If we were working with, say, 80% of sighting reports, 80% of sightings, 80% of events, then our conclusions may be a little more accurate. But being that we're working with less than half, a minority, we need to be cautious with our conclusions, cautious with our thought processes, knowing that the data we have is incomplete. And that's troublesome, but that's the way it goes. So the data we've collected over the past 80 or so years strongly suggests and demonstrates that UFOs can work in waves. regardless of what UFOs tend to be, UFO sighting reports tend to work in waves. The initial first major wave that we know of in modern UFO history, and that date is open to debate, was the 1896-1897 airship wave in the United States. Most of those sightings were central or east of the continental U.S. There were a few in California, but mostly from the central part of the Bible Belt, moving eastward. After you move past that initial wave, there are quite a few sightings, but not really enough to define one as a wave, whether World War II, or World War I era, or moving forward from there. The next major wave was 1947. Of course, everyone knows the Roswell event occurred that year. The Kenneth Arnold event of June 24th occurred that year. That was mainly a United States wave. A next major wave was the 1952 wave. That wave contained the Washington National sightings, which occurred in July. That was not only a U.S. wave, but it occurred in Western Europe also. These waves I'm listing are major waves that are well known to UFO researchers. There are other minor waves that may be just as important, but again, we're working with incomplete data. So I'm kind of picking and choosing the ones I'm moving forward with. So the next major wave that really comes to mind is the 1954 French UFO sightings wave, UFO landings wave. This was an intense wave that happened over the entire calendar year. There were over 200 landing cases. Only 15% of these cases were single witness, which is a great point to discuss. A lot of UFO sighting cases, the stronger ones at least, are multiple witness cases, meaning that you have multiple witnesses at different geographical locations. They're seeing the same thing. That adds a lot of strength to a case. In the 54 French wave, only 15% were single witness, meaning that the vast majority were multiple witness. Great stuff. 80 cases during that calendar year feature witnesses that saw the craft landing. In other words, they did not sight the UFO once it had landed or when it was in the air. They were able to watch the craft or the unidentified flying object became an unidentified landed object. They watched that transpire. Very interesting. Moving forward, you get to 1957. That wave featured the Levelland, Texas UFO sightings of November 2nd and 3rd of that year. That was also in Brazil. So some of these waves are not so much specific to a country. They can be. But a good majority of the waves are featured in multiple countries across different continents. Interesting to say the least. 1959, there was a major wave in New Guinea. 1965 was a U.S. and Australian wave. This features 3 cases that remain unexplained that are very strong and benchmarks, cornerstones of the UFO topic. The December 9th case in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. The September 3rd case of Exeter, New Hampshire. Again, multiple witness cases. And July 1st in Malençon, France. 3 major cases that have multiple witnesses that remain unexplained that all contain data that strongly suggest at least something anomalous. Maybe not extraterrestrial, but something strongly in that direction of at least an anomalous event. Something unexplained. Something unnatural. Potentially artificial. We arrive at 1973. There was a U.S. wave that was also featured in Western Europe once again. This wave contained 2 major cases that are well known to most individuals. The October 18th Coin helicopter UFO interactive case and the Pascagoula abduction of October 11th. 2 major cases. Again, 2 cases that have a lot of testimony, a lot of good evidence, no sign of hoaxing, multiple witnesses. They remain unexplained to this day. And finally, the 1989/1991 Belgium UFO wave, better known as the Belgian UFO, the Belgian Triangles wave of that year, of those years, I should say. Again, multiple witnesses on the ground, radar traces, law enforcement officials, very strong case, military witnesses, jets sent to intercept these triangles. So strong stuff. So the numbers we have strongly suggest this phenomenon does work in waves at times. Other times it doesn't. Other times it seems to back off. The percentage of sightings that are reported seems to lessen. Is that an accurate conclusion? We don't know. We really don't know at this point. Will we ever know? Possibly not. But the data we have shows these things act in waves. The 2 points I brought up earlier in the program are directly connected to this scenario. We're assuming that our data is correct. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the fact that it's incomplete. Therefore, there may be other major waves in other parts of the world. There may be events that have transpired over longer periods of time with, again, multiple witnesses we're not aware of. There may be other events that we're aware of that we're missing testimony, we're missing evidence, we're missing parts of the puzzle. What is the result of this? What happens when we have this lack of data? Well, one, major cases may fall through the cracks. We may be blissfully unaware of a major case, a landing or an interaction or an abduction case that is very strong, has multiple chains of evidence, but because it hasn't been reported, we're unaware of it. Two, these may not be the only major waves. In past centuries, and past decades, I should say, I should go back that far in time, the internet was not in existence. People communicated by snail mail. There was no long-distance telephone service. So in past decades, when communication capabilities were a little less than now, it's reasonable to assume that there may have been events and waves that occurred in other countries that weren't as advanced and that have not come to light. Say a wave in Argentina, West Africa, deep in the Sahara, areas of the world that weren't as well connected as they are now, say in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, that's a possibility. But again, we don't know because we're not aware of the data. The second point about most sightings being unreported directly makes a connection to all this waves, data, these scenarios that we have. Because most UFO witnesses don't report their sightings, we're unaware of those sightings completely. We don't know what's going on. If we had a stronger cross-section of data, we would be able to discern some patterns, make some conclusions that are more grounded in reality and maybe more accurate. We're not there yet. So when we attribute percentages of UFO sightings to a certain country or a certain time of day or a certain kind of structure that the craft seems to have, those conclusions may be off and may be skewed because of the amount of data we have or the lack thereof. And this leads me to a case in point. I work here in San Antonio, Texas. I've been studying the UFO phenomenon for 35 some odd years. It's a logistical nightmare. It's very troubling. It's very it's labor intensive. It's usually not rewarding. It takes a lot of time, but it's fascinating. I love the process. I love applying an objective, unbiased mind to this stuff. This is a total enigma. The reason I use UFO problem, that term, is because it's an unsolved question. Any unsolved question deserves to be looked at. It's a problem to be solved. Working here in Texas, I've been collecting sighting reports and for about 30 years now, a few years after I started studying this phenomenon. I have stored up all that data. I have worked the numbers as far as the shapes of the craft, a time of day, what years this happened, was it a certain county here in Texas, what was being seen, what percentage are single witness, what percentage are multiple witness, and all these numbers are fascinating to work on and try to process. But again, they're probably skewed. They're probably inaccurate because most sightings don't get reported. Having said that, the numbers are interesting, at least for here in Texas. And I went through my files earlier today in preparation for this program, this premiere episode. And I did a little summarization of the years between 2001 and 2010. I picked a decade. And that decade happened to be the one where I got the most sighting reports. As to why that is, I wouldn't even bother to guess at that. But having said that, between 2001 and 2010, the number of sightings that I collected suggests, and I combined this with some of the information that's available at the National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON. Both of their websites are open to the public, so you can gain access to this information. And working the numbers over, between 2001 and 2010 here in Texas, the number of sightings per year ranged from about 170 to almost 1,000. The high year being 2008, the low year being 2001. What do these numbers mean? Not a thing. Why? Because most sightings go unreported. Therefore, in 2008, when we see there's almost 1,000 sightings, just over 900. Is that number accurate? Probably not. That reflects a less than majority percentage of UFO sightings that have been reported. Go to 2001. 2001 is slightly under 170 sightings for the year. Is that number accurate? Probably not. We don't know what percentage of sightings go unreported. Therefore, our totals are not accurate. But we have to do what we have to do. We have to work with what we have, what we're given. It's a double-edged sword. It's important for investigators to be professional, to try to interact with witnesses to gather this kind of data. But it's also important for witnesses to chronicle events quickly and report them quickly so that investigators have data to work with. So it should be a hand-in-hand effort. So some of the other numbers that I worked over from that time period are interesting. Again, perhaps not accurate, but interesting nonetheless. The shapes that are attributed to UFOs, only 2 shapes were attributed to over 10% of the sightings. Almost a full 12% of sightings were of a circle, a saucer-shaped object. So flying saucer is still the prevalent thing that's being described in our skies. It's still the classic flying saucer, a disc. That was about 12%. Slightly over 10% was a simple light. And that strongly suggests that 10% is attributed to nocturnal light sightings, that sort of thing. No other configuration even made 10%. There were 3 other ones that arrived at about 9% of sightings. One was unknown, where the witness just was unable to discern any kind of shape, any kind of structure. It was simply an unknown. That's almost 10%. Again, triangle shapes, almost 10%, and spheres, which is a little different than circles. The circle is more attributed to a flying disc, a flying saucer, a saucer-shaped craft with maybe a bubble top on the top end of it. A sphere strongly suggests something round, a ball, an oval, something along those lines. So beyond that, all the other descriptions are far down as far as percentages, 3 or 4%. So you have a fairly small number of shapes that are being reported here in Texas. Is that pattern kind of common to most of the states? We don't know. Would the numbers be accurate for most states? Again, probably not, because most sightings go unreported. It does pay dividends to work the numbers over. It does pay dividends to chronicle all this and store all this, because we're making the effort to try to find some answers to this problem, this enigma. But having said that, when we look at the numbers, we look at the data, we look at the totals, the percentages, the patterns we discern, the conclusions we draw, we need to be cautious and careful, because they may be inaccurate. We need more data. We need more testimony. We need more raw data. I can't stress that enough. So, but that's kind of the idea about UFO research. Part of it is just a numbers game, processing numbers and look at it from that point of view. In the efforts to research UFOs, you need multiple chains of evidence. Testimony is the first step you take. That's the first interaction you have with a UFO witness, their testimony. They're telling you what they saw, what they experienced. That's extremely important from both points of view. The witness should chronicle this as soon as possible, including all details, every detail, as soon as possible, because, again, human memories do change. Beyond that, turn it in. Once the investigator has that data, the investigator works with it, and it goes from there. And that's all fine, but we all need a higher percentage. We need more UFO witnesses to come forward, so our data is more accurate. That's an incredibly important part of this whole scenario. Now, would that affect the percentage of cases that remain unexplained? That's 5 to 10%. And I apologize for me speaking at the beginning of the program. It might possibly affect that. We don't know. Again, that percentage is arrived at after examining the study reports we have, which is most likely less than half. So we can look at this unidentified percentage. 5 to 10% remain unexplained after objective investigation. Of that percentage of unidentified, of that percentage of cases that we just can't explain, unexplained, what percentage is military aircraft? We don't know. Certainly a percentage is that. What percentage is other mundane phenomena that we're unable to arrive at because of the lack of evidence, lack of data? That's a possibility. Is a certain percentage of those unexplained potentially extraterrestrial, potentially an alien spacecraft or alien visitation? That's a strong possibility. We just don't know. Would we be able to whittle that down or arrive at some stronger conclusions with the data? Certainly yes. Certainly yes. And that's why I push for UFO witnesses to come forward. They are the source of information, the only source we have. We have very few UFO photographs, very few UFO videos. The vast majority of our evidence, of our data, is witness testimony. The pressure is on them to come forward and give us their events, give us their data, and we can work with it and arrive at some answers. Now, having said that, will we ever be able to prove a case definitively? It can be very difficult. It can be very difficult. Without a piece of organic material, i.e. a body, without a piece of recovered technology, something that's non-terrestrial in origin, in other words, alien spacecraft. Without that, we can't prove the case. But with strong testimony and multiple chains of evidence, some of those cases strongly lead you to the extraterrestrial. Roswell comes to mind. The Lake and East Bedwaters case of 56, which I'll profile in a future episode, comes to mind, where I guess I should explain that statement at length. In the course of UFO investigations, and this goes directly to numbers, you have multiple explanations on your table. You don't have an actual physical table in front of you, but it's just a way of expressing myself. You have multiple explanations. You have bugs in a windshield, birds, lightning strikes, aerial phenomenon, misidentified aircraft, misidentified helicopters, hoaxes, misidentifications, nocturnal lights, stars, meteors. It runs the gamut. But the extraterrestrial is there. And in the process of investigations, you whittle it down. You eliminate possibilities. You eliminate birds. You eliminate fox. You eliminate bugs in a windshield. You eliminate hoax. You whittle it down, and whatever is left, those are possibilities. With the stronger cases, the ones that have more testimony, more data, extraterrestrial is usually on the table. That speaks volumes. There's an interesting quote I heard from my friend Kevin Randall a few years ago. And he stated, and I've been able to research this, and he's absolutely right. It's counterintuitive. It's illogical, but in the UFO topic, this is true. And I quoted him, not verbatim, but the idea was that the cases with more evidence, more data, different chains of evidence, they remain unexplained, that's the way it works. As opposed to if you're a law enforcement official and you're investigating a case, a car crash, a murder, what have you, and you have more evidence, you have multiple witnesses, the likelihood of you being able to solve that case goes up because you have more data, because you have more testimony, you have more chains of evidence. It works opposite to the UFO field. When you have a UFO case with more chains of evidence, more multiple witnesses, a potentiality for physical evidence, some level of instrumentality. In other words, the more chains of evidence you have, the less likely it is you're going to solve that case. That makes absolutely no sense at all. No sense whatsoever. Having said that, again, you can't prove the case. You can't prove the extraterrestrial. That's very difficult, virtually impossible. But again, it's counterintuitive. It's illogical. You would think with more data, more evidence, you'd be able to solve the case. It works in reverse in the UFO field. Despite that anomaly, we need data. We need evidence. We need UFO witnesses to come forward and give us their stuff. That's very, very important in this field. Moving forward from this number game, this attempt to work the numbers, to work patterns, to work percentages, that's kind of all we have at this point. Does that stunt our ability to discern, actually, to arrive at any answers in this enigma? Absolutely not. No way. No, it doesn't. In the effort to investigate the UFO phenomenon, we cannot leave any stone unturned. We need to use every tool at our disposal. Period. That's the only logical course of action. Therefore, working the data we have is extremely important. Despite it being incomplete, it's still important. Anomalous things are being reported in the sky. You have honest, intelligent people reporting things they cannot identify. They're coming forward in a very straightforward, honest manner. They want to know some answers. As we investigate these things, and people do misidentify things, the honest people will accept those investigative results. The ones that remain unexplained, those are truly groundbreaking. Those are truly anomalous events that we can't explain. That's extremely important. And that leads me to, it's one way why I've arrived at this push, this motivation to encourage witnesses to come forward. It's very important because, not only because we have incomplete data, we cannot afford to have an important case fall by the wayside. We can't afford to have an important case fall through the cracks. If there's another Roswell out there, if there's another Hexburg, if there's another Socorro out there, if there's another Lake of Deep Bedwaters, if there's another case along those lines out there, and it's not reported, that's a loss to all of us. That's to the detriment of the entire UFO community, specifically the research community. We can't be out there like the military observing the skies 24 hours a day. It's up to witnesses to come forward and let us know when an event has transpired. Therefore, we can investigate it. If we don't know, we can't investigate it. And that's a strong possibility. Because, again, because most sightings go unreported, there may be some major sightings that have gone by the wayside that we're unaware of. There may have been waves in other countries we're unaware of. In the process of researching this stuff, will those events come to light? Will those possibility of other waves come to light? They tend to over time. They do. And that's a positive thing. The only trouble with that is those things come to light, they tend to come to light decades after the fact. And when you investigate this stuff, specifically in the field, you want to investigate events that happen relatively close in time. In other words, something a few months past, a few weeks, maybe a year. Investigating something that's decades gone is very troublesome. It's very problematic. Physical evidence is gone. Testimony is troublesome because human memories change. And you don't want to get caught in the trap of having to accept second or third hand testimony. That can be very troubling. So if this stuff is reported to us quickly, and the percentage of reports or sightings are reported to us, and we get it up to a majority, over 70%, 80%, that would be great, because then fewer things would fall by the wayside, and the conclusions we draw from the data would be more accurate, because we have more of it. We have more data. We want a long, strong cross-section of data. I apply the scientific method to UFO investigations. I've never seen a UFO, so I take a very dispassionate, impersonal take and approach to this topic. Therefore, I'm all about the science. What does science demand? The science demands data. Science demands long cross-sections of data over long periods of time. That helps us arrive at some answers. Do we have that in the UFO field? To a point we do, but we need more. We do have a long cross-section of data over several decades. But again, it's incomplete. So, but despite all these issues, the data shows, in my humble opinion, alien visitation has taken place. The data shows strongly, in my humble opinion, that most of these sightings are mundane. They're explainable. The vast majority are. But a small percentage is consistently there. Are those unexplained? Could some be alien spacecraft? Certainly. That's a strong possibility. That's fascinating. That's incredible. That is a earth-shaking event, unlike anything else we've experienced in human history. And that's the point. We're all investigating this stuff because we want to find the answers to what's going on. The potential there for events that are truly anomalous, truly groundbreaking, truly events that would change human history is there. It's a strong possibility. That's fascinating. That's the motivation in and of itself to investigate this stuff. So, in conclusion of tonight, I want to strongly encourage UFO witnesses to come forward. Strongly encourage them to move forward, to come forward with their data, with their testimony. Chronicle your events as quickly as possible. Every detail, even if it seems unimportant. Weather conditions, time of day, description of the craft. If you were with anybody, get their testimony also. Every bit of available data, chronicle, bring it forward as quickly as possible to a reputable researcher or a reputable UFO investigative group. And they will take it from there and get the ball rolling. That's extremely important. There are highly professional people in this field involved in this effort to investigate the UFO problem, and they're worth the time to find. If you're a witness and you feel like you can't go forward, yes, you can. Yes, you can. They're competent, reliable, professional people working this stuff, trying to find out what's going on. Seek them out. They're out there. I'm one of them. If you want to try to find my platforms, you can reach me at William Pullin UFO Historian on Facebook. That's my personal blog. You can contact me there. With any sighting reports, questions, comments, you can express your feelings to me. You want to interact and just discuss the UFO topic, I am there, available at your leisure. I also have an objective UFO group entitled Euroval, a Historical Review. And that's an objective examination of the history of the phenomenon. Book reviews, case histories, profiles, poll questions, things of that nature. So far more objective. But that's where everyone can find me. Again, I want to thank Adam Davies and Mike Ritzberg for this wonderful opportunity. Tonight has been UFOs, a Numbers Game, the premiere episode of From Beyond, Not of This Earth. I want to thank everyone for listening to this live and otherwise. And until next time, keep watching the skies.